Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupada, Paramhamsa Parvadikacharya, To Tadasata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Ghananjana Shalakhaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamhayam Didati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanbitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I understand that we are on Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text 34, or is it 35?
34.
Apisvid aste Bhagavan Sukham Yobo.
Apisvid aste Bhagavan Sukham Bo.
Apisvid aste Bhagavan Sukham Bo.
Apisvid aste Bhagavan Sukham Bo.
Yat Sattvatam Kama Dugho Niruddha. Yat Yasatvatam Kama Dugdho Niruddha. Yam Atmananti Smahi Sabdayonim. Yam Atmananti Smahi Sabdayonim. Mano Mayam Sattva Turiya Tattvam. Mano Mayam Sattva Turiya Tattvam. Apisvidaste Bhagavan Sukhamvo. Ya Sattvatam Kama Dugdho Niruddha. Yam Atmananti Smahi Shabdayonim. Mano Mayam Sattva Turiyas Tattvam. Apis Vidaste Bhagavan Sukhambo. Yasattvatam Kama Dugdho Niruddha. Yam Atmananti Smahi Shabdayonim. Mano Mayam Sattvaturiya Tattvam. Apid Svidaste Bhagavan Sukhambo. Yasatvatam kama dugdho niruddha. Yam atmananti smahi shabda yonim. Manomayam sattvaturiya tattvam. Apis vidaste bhagavan sukhambo. Yasatvatam kama dugdho niruddha. Yam atmananti smahi shabda yonim. Manomayam sattvaturiya tattvam. Apis vidaste bhagavan sukhambo. Yasatvatam kama dugdho niruddha. Yam atmananti smahi shabda yonim. Manomayam sattvaturiya tattvam. Apis vidaste bhagavan sukhambo. Yasatvatam kama dugdho niruddha. Yam atmananti smahi shabda yonim. Manomayam sattvaturiya tattvam. Ladies. Apis vidaste bhagavan sukhambo. Yasatvatam kama dugdho niruddha. Yam atmananti smahi shabda yonim. Manomayam sattvaturiya tattvam. Api, as also. Svit, whether. Aste, does he. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Sukham, all happiness. Vaha, of you. Yaha, one who. Sattvatam, of the devotees. Kama dugdha, source of all desires. Aniruddha, the plenary expansion of Aniruddha. Yam, whom. Amananti, they accept. Sma, from your. He, certainly. Shabdayonim, the cause of the Rig Veda. Manahamayam, creator of the mind. Sattva, transcendental. Turiya, the fourth expansion. Tattvam, principle. The translation reads, may I inquire whether Aniruddha is doing well? He is the fulfiller of all the desires of the pure devotees and has been considered from yore to be the cause of the Rig Veda, the creator of the mind and the fourth plenary expansion of Vishnu. So I say, and you all please repeat. May I inquire whether Aniruddha is doing well? He is the fulfiller of all the desires of the pure devotees and has been considered from yore to be the cause of the Rig Veda, the creator of the mind and the fourth plenary expansion of Vishnu. Okay, so here's the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Adi Chaturbhuj, the original expansions from Baladev are Vasudeva, Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. All of them are Vishnu Tattvas, or non-different personalities of Godhead. In the incarnation of Sri Ram, all these different expansions appeared for particular pastimes. Lord Ram is the original Vasudeva, and his brothers were Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Aniruddha is also the cause of Mahavishnu, from whose breathing the Rig Veda appeared. All this is nicely explained in the Markandeya Puran. In the incarnation of Lord Krishna, Aniruddha appeared as the son of the Lord. Lord Krishna in Dvaraka is the Vasudeva expansion of the original group. The original Lord Krishna never leaves Goloka Vrindavan. All the planetary expansions, rather all the plenary expansions, are one in the same Vishnu Tattva, and there is no difference in their potency. Apisvidaste Bhagavan Sukhambo Yasatvatam Kam Dugdho Niruddha Yam Atmananti Smahi Shabdayonim Manomayam Sattvaturiya Tattvam. May I inquire whether Aniruddha is doing well. He is the fulfiller of all the desires of the pure devotees and has been considered from yore to be the cause of the Rig Veda, the creator of the mind, and the fourth plenary expansion of Vishnu. This chapter, chapter 1 of the third canto, is broken into two sections from the first verse to the 24th verse is where we read about Vidura approaching Uddhava. Then from 25 to 45, which is the section that we're in right now. In that section, we find out about Vidura asking Uddhava about all the relatives, all those in the Yadu dynasty. As we heard earlier, the Yadu dynasty was already gone at this point, and Vidura is asking Uddhava about them as if he's just inquiring, how things are going. But both of them know, Vidura and Uddhava, that there is no Yadu dynasty at this time, and they know that Krishna has departed. And soon the Pandus will depart as well. So this is kind of some more on the overall timeline, that when Krishna decided to leave the world, he sent his chariot driver to inform Arjuna to come and remove the devotees, particularly the ladies and queens from Dwarka and take them to shelter. They were headed toward Hastinapur. So Krishna sent his chariot driver to do that. So by the time Arjuna gets to Dwarka, Krishna is already gone. And they discover, as Arjuna is leaving, that the ocean is just taking over Dwarka, and Dwarka is sinking into the ocean. And then, of course, Arjuna will find himself immediately in difficulty when they're attacked by some so-called infidel cowherd men. And the infidel cowherd men will be able to plunder the entire entourage and take away all the queens of Krishna. And Arjuna will find that his arrows don't work and that he can't fight them off. Finally, he's reduced to just whacking on them with his bow. He can't do anything else. And he returns to Hastinapur some, month later or something like that. So Arjuna has left the Pandavas in Hastinapur on the request of the chariot driver of Krishna. And when he gets there, he discovers that, he's supposed to remove everybody. And then all these inauspicious things happen. All this time, Yudhisthira is wondering what's going on, but he sees bad signs. So he knows whatever's going on is not good. And he suspects that Krishna has left the world. And this is all described in the first canto. So we've already read that part, that Arjuna was supposed to come back, but he took longer than was expected, and then all these fearful omens are visible, and Yudhisthira suspects that what's happened is that Arjuna will come back with news that Krishna is no longer on the planet. And of course that's pretty good prognostication that will actually be what Arjuna will tell him. However, more than that, we'll learn that the entire Yadu dynasty has disappeared. So in Bhagavad Gita, we hear yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhutanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrujamyaham paratranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartayam sambhavami yuge yuge. Krishna has come to deliver the pious and annihilate the miscreants. So we've heard that Krishna was supposed to appear on the earth when Bhumi Devi was disturbed by all these bellicose and demoniac forces that were assembling on the earth plane. These were in fact demons who had a plan to ultimately attack the heavenly planets. That was the overall plan of the demons. They wanted to attack the heavenly worlds. So they were amassing on the earth plane. Bhumi Devi could understand this, and the demigods could understand this. So they wanted Krishna to come and remove these demons, and he agreed to do that. And he agreed to do it in his original form, his Swayam Prakash, or his original expansion. So he comes to the material world, and even from the very beginning, as a baby, he starts the process of removing the demons with Putana and others, as a small child. Even while he's playing with his cowherd friends, he's removing the demons. But after a while, so many demons are removed, but Krishna's thinking, this is taking a lot of time. I want to do a wholesale program here. I'm going to get rid of lots of demons at the same time. So that's why the Battle of Kurukshetra happened, so that all these unwanted soldiers and royalty would be all at one place, and Krishna could wipe them out all at one time with the Battle of Kurukshetra. So he tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita that you can fight or not fight, but they're already killed. They won't last much longer. But if you fight, you will get the credit for it, and you will get the spoils of the battle. And of course, Arjuna does this, and he does win, along with the other Pandavas. They begin to rule, and as we said last week, they rule for some 36 years after winning the Battle of Kurukshetra. And then 36 years later, that's when all this is happening, that the Yadu dynasty is annihilated, Krishna leaves the planet, Arjuna goes to try to ferry the ladies, Krishna's queens and consorts, to safety in Hastinapur, but fails to do so. And when Arjuna gets back, that's when Yudhisthira makes up his mind that there's no point in living any longer. So Yudhisthira assigns Parikshit as the king, who is the only descendant of the Pandavas. And then he dresses down and leaves the palace, and he's followed by Bhimsen, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadev, and Draupadi, as well as one dog. So they travel to the Himalayas, and eventually the Pandavas give up their bodies at that point and go first back to the heavenly planets and then to the spiritual world. So that's kind of how the timeline plays itself out. And here we are particularly hearing about Aniruddha. And we're finding out that Aniruddha is one of the Chaturvyuha. The way the expansions work, and this is quite complicated actually, just a few weeks ago we were reading about it in Madhya Lila 20, and the 180s, there we find out about some of these different flavors of expansions. So Krishna is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is one. Godhead is one. However, he expands himself into many different kinds of forms. And he comes also in various types of expansions to do various different kinds of things, and these are described in the Vedic literatures. So first of all, we have the Swamsas and Vibhinamsas. So Swamsas are Krishna's direct Vishnu Tattva expansions. They are full potency of the Supreme, as we're hearing that the various expansions of Krishna are as powerful as Krishna. They are not less powerful, they are as powerful as Krishna, but they are expansions. But we have the Vibhinamsas, who are the tiny living entities who are all of us and the demigods and all of the expanded jivas. So these Vibhinamsas, they do not have the same potency as the Vishnu Tattva. They are not as powerful as the Vishnu Tattvas, rather they are small. And we find also that when Krishna expands, and he expands in a form that looks exactly like Krishna, that's called a Prakash expansion. When he expands in a form that does not look like Krishna, that's called a Vilas expansion. So forms like Ramachandra, like Vamandev, like Kurma, Matsya, these forms don't look like Krishna, and so they are Vilas expansions. Then we have actually 6 classifications of avatars. We have, of course, the guna avatars, which are Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So these are only 3 guna avatars. And Brahma is the head or the personification of the mode of passion. And Vishnu is the expansion or the source of the mode of goodness. And we have Shiva, who is the controller of the mode of ignorance. So these are guna avatars. The 3 gunas are Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas. The next classification of avatars is the Purusha avatars. And there's also only 3 of them. So the Purusha avatars are the 3 main Vishnus, which are Mahavishnu, Garbhavishnu, and Sveta Vishnu. So there are 3 Vishnus. Mahavishnu is the source of the material universes. And as we hear today in this purport, he's also the source of the Rig Veda. So Mahavishnu lies down in the causal ocean, so sometimes he's called Karnadakshayi Vishnu or Karnanavashayi Vishnu, so he's lying in the causal ocean. And out of his pores come unlimited universes, and he is called, therefore, Mahavishnu. Later, he subdivides himself, Mahavishnu, into innumerable forms, and each of these forms enter into each individual universe. And there we have the unlimited versions of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So Garbhodakshaya Vishnu means he is lying on the Garbha ocean, which is in each universe. Each universe is filled half with water. So there's the Garbha ocean, and that exists in every universe, whereas Mahavishnu lies on the causal ocean. Garbha Vishnu lies on the Garbha ocean. The Garbha ocean is within each universe, and the Garbha ocean is produced when Garbhodakshaya Vishnu first enters into the universe. There's nothing in the universe, so he fills it up with his own perspiration, and that perspiration is the Garbha ocean. Then he lies upon the Seshanaga bed, and from his navel grows the lotus flower from which Brahma is born. So now we've talked about 2 of the Purusha avatars. We've talked about Karnadakshaya Vishnu, and we've talked about Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, but there's a 3rd. And on a special planet in each universe, there is a planet called Svetadweep, and it's the highest planet in each material universe. And there on that planet is Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. On Svetadweep is a milk ocean, and on this milk ocean, also on Anantasesh. All these three Vishnus there, all lying on a serpent bed of Ananta. But Karnadakshaya Vishnu lies on the causal ocean, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu lies on the Garbha ocean, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu lies on the Kshir or milk ocean. So each is on his own different ocean, and they are known and named as a consequence of the ocean that they reside on or that they lie on. Now this Kshirodakshaya Vishnu is also the super soul. So from Kshirodakshaya Vishnu emanates the super soul who enters into the hearts of all living entities. So there are further expansions like a telescope. There is one Mahavishnu, and from that Mahavishnu comes countless Garbha Vishnus, and they enter into each universe. And in each universe there is a planet where we have Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, and this Kshirodakshaya Vishnu in each universe also expands into countless Kshirodakshaya Vishnus that become resident super souls in the hearts of all the living beings in each universe. So this is kind of the breakdown. Like a telescope, one thing comes from another. And we learn that this Mahavishnu is an expansion of Aniruddha. And moreover, we learn that if we look at the overall expansion tree, we have Krishna, who is Avatari. He is the source of all the avatars. So from Krishna expands Balaram. That's the first expansion. And from Balaram, then we have the Chaturvyuha, the first Chaturvyuha. So there is Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha in that order. So we have Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And this is the first Chaturvyuha, which is in Dwarka. And Prabhupada calls them aides de camp in one place. They have a duty of stationing themselves at the perimeters of the spiritual world to make sure that no one enters into the spiritual world who is unwanted. So this is the first expansion. And then from the Aniruddha of the first Chaturvyuha expands a Narayan expansion. And from this Narayan expansion expands a second Chaturvyuha, again of Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And this is the second Chaturvyuha from which the Aniruddha expands into Mahavishnu. So that's how it telescopes down. The second Chaturvyuha is not in Dwarka, but in Mathura, in the spiritual world, in the Mathura precinct. And this is how these various Chaturvyuhas exist. And we discover the second Chaturvyuha does take part in Krishna's pastimes, the second Chaturvyuha, that Pradyumna takes a role as one of Krishna's sons, as Pradyumna. So Aniruddha also takes a role as one of Krishna's sons. And we have this kind of gradual expansion system. So we talked about the guna avatars. There's 3 of them. And we've talked now about the Purusha avatars, and there's only 3 of them. And we've talked about how they expand. Then we have the next category, which is Leela avatars. And Leela avatars are a very special category. They're the expansions of the Supreme that have various pastimes in the material world. So we have Leela avatars having pastimes. Then we have, after Leela avatars, we have Manvantara avatars. And Manvantara avatars, they have a role in each Manu's rule. In a day of Brahma, there are there are 14 Manus, and in each day of Brahma, there are certain avatars that take their position in that jurisdiction of one Manu. And so they are also Manvantara avatars, as well as the Manus themselves are considered a type of avatar. Then we have the Yuga avatars, and they come in each Yuga, and the purpose of the Yuga avatar is to deliver the Yuga Dharma of that particular Yuga. In Satya Yuga, the Yuga avatar is whitish in color. He has 4 arms, has dreadlocks, wears a deer skin, and carries a water pot, and teaches the process of meditation. That is in Satya Yuga. The Supreme comes in Treta Yuga in a reddish incarnation, or Rakta, and he has 2 arms, I believe, and has 3 Brahman threads, and carries a shruk, which is a spoon for doing various kinds of fire sacrifices. So this avatar is coming to establish the process of doing various yagyas. So in Satya Yuga, the Yuga Dharma is meditation, and in Treta Yuga, the Yuga Dharma is doing fire sacrifices. In Dwapara Yuga, the Yuga avatar is blackish, and that is Krishna himself. So the Yuga avatar is blackish, and Krishna in Dwapara Yuga comes to establish the Yuga Dharma of deity worship. So he establishes deities. And finally, in Kali Yuga, the color of the Yuga avatar is golden, and he is Lord Chaitanya himself. And Lord Chaitanya comes to deliver the Yuga Dharma of Kali Yuga, and we all know that the Yuga Dharma of Kali Yuga is right. So this is the Yuga Dharma of Kali Yuga. So, by the way, in only this episode or go around of the 4 yugas do we have Lord Chaitanya and Krishna. In all other revolutions of Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, it is not Krishna and not Lord Chaitanya. It's some other avatar that comes in that particular space of time. But in the particular one that we're in, we have the fortune to have made our own appearance in the material world just shortly after Krishna, and even more shortly after Lord Chaitanya's appearance. So we have that great benediction. So these are 5 types of avatars now that we've talked about. We've talked about 1, the guna avatars, which are the 3 modes of nature, the particular avatar that's in charge of each mode of nature. Then we talked about 2, which were the Purusha avatars, Mahavishnu, Garbhavishnu, and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Then we talked about the Leela avatars, who are there to perform various Leelas. Then we talked about the Manvantara avatars. And then we talked about the Yuga avatars. So that's 5. The 6th type are called Shakti-Avesha avatars. And usually Shakti-Avesha avatars are avatars that are not Vishnu Tattva, but they come in the material world to perform a important pastime that Krishna wants to have take place, but Krishna does not do it himself or with one of his own expansions. Rather, he empowers a living being to perform this pastime. And examples of these Shakti-Avesha avatars are like Vyasadeva, like Muhammad, like Jesus, like Prabhupada, and others that also are a empowered incarnation. They do something very amazing in the material world, and they're given that power by the Supreme, but they themselves are not Vishnu Tattva. They are not direct expansions. They are Vibhinamsas, or what we usually call Jiva, or Jiva Tattva. So we've been through a few avatars here. We briefly talked about the Chaturvyuha, and we've talked about the timeline of Vidura meeting Uddhava and what happens right after that, and how the Pandavas figure into it. Any questions about those? Yeah.
What are the names of the Yuga avatars for Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga?
Yeah, good question. It's in the 11th canto, where Maharaj Nimi meets the Nava-Yogendras. Antariksha is describing the various avatars. That's one of the questions, I believe it's Antariksha, of the Nava-Yogendras. So the Nava-Yogendras are 9 naked sages that travel all over the universe. And they were actually sons of Bharat Maharaj. And so Maharaj Nimi was performing a fire sacrifice, and they appeared in his fire sacrifice. And when they appeared, Maharaj Nimi had the good fortune and took the opportunity to ask them questions. And one of the questions he asked was about the various expansions and avatars of Krishna appearing in the material world. And that's where it talks about these. And there's about, I think, 8 names for the avatar in Satya Yuga, and similar 7, 5, somewhere like that, names of the avatar in Treta Yuga. But I don't remember any of them right now, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Another question? Yeah. How Aniruddha creates the mind?
How does he create the mind? The good question. I haven't actually heard it spelled out anywhere. It's just that he's considered to be the origin of the mind in some way or another. As we hear, as the material elements are gradually precipitated out or created from the, well, we have the Brahm Jyoti, and the Brahma Jyoti has a material aspect of it, which is the material elements, which are called the Pradhan, and the Pradhan then gets agitated and becomes the Mahatat. And then gradually we have this expansion of the 3 modes of nature, and from this we have the first group is the subtle elements, which are mind, intelligence, and false ego. So this is where somehow or another Pradyumna figures into it, but I've never heard anything more than that, or I've never read anything more than he's somehow associated with the mind, whereas Pradyumna is associated with the intelligence, I believe it is. So, you know, the Vasudeva expansion is also associated with certain things. And all these four rather, were part of Lord Ramachandra's pastime. So we hear that we have Lord Ramachandra, we have Bharat, and then we have Lakshman and Shatrughna. And these are sometimes described as being expansions of the four Chaturvyuha of these, you know, Vasudeva, which is Lord Ramachandra, and we have Sankarshan, which is Bharat, and then I think Lakshman is Pradyumna, and Shatrughna is Aniruddha. So I think that's the way it works. But sometimes also it's said that the four brothers in Ram Leela are actually the four, what's the name for them? The four items that Vishnu holds. They're also the discus, the club, the lotus flower, and the conch. So sometimes they're also said to be the expansions of the four articles that Vishnu holds. So that's another aspect of another way of understanding who the four brothers are in Ram Leela. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what's the location of the causal ocean?
The causal ocean is on the border between the spiritual world and the material world. So sometimes it's also, I believe it's identical with the Viraja River or the Vaitarani River. There's different names for it. There's a perimeter to the spiritual world. It's kind of the borderline between spiritual world and the material world. And that ocean is where Karnadakshai Vishnu lies. And from his breathing and from his pores expand all the material universes, and they expand into the material region. And that's the causal ocean.
Buddha is a Shakti Vaishya avatar?
Yeah, Buddha is a Shakti Vaishya avatar. And there's a few, I think Prithu is a Shakti Vaishya avatar. I believe that's true. I'm not sure about Kalki. I'm not sure whether he's a Shakti Vaishya or he's a...
What about
Parashuram, I think he's a Shakti Vaishya too. I think he's a Shakti Vaishya avatar, but I don't remember for sure.
So Shakti Vaishya avatars are Jiva Tattvas?
Yes, they're Jivatama. But just to make things not straightforward, occasionally they can be actually Vishnu Tattva. It does mention that somewhere, you know, that just like we said one time that in the whole 33 million, duty rosters of the demigods, when someone does not have the proper karma to man one of the positions, then Krishna does it himself as a expansion. And so I think it's something similar, that if there's no living entity in the universe that has the right karma to perform the function of one of the Shakti Vaishya avatars, Krishna does it himself. And in that case, He's a Shaktavesha avatar, but he's also Vishnu Tattva. But most of the time, it's a living entity. So here we have this kind of, this part of the story is not very relishable for devotees, you know, this idea that Krishna is leaving the planet, the Yadu dynasty is leaving. So Vidura in Uddhava, they're all in this morose mood, and none of them stay on the planet very much longer. Vidura, we find, he has a mission, and Vidura's mission is to go back to Hastinapur and to preach to his brother, Dhritarashtra. And he will do that, and Dhritarashtra will snap out of his, you know, material consciousness and actually turn his life around in the last days of his lifetime. And then after Dhritarashtra departs, then Vidura himself will depart. Uddhava will continue on eventually to Badarakashram and meet with the sages that Krishna had asked him to meet with, and they will have some discussions, and then Uddhava will also depart. And this is kind of, you know, we find out that very soon the Pandavas will depart, and that leaves behind Parikshit. And that's kind of how everything winds up. And so there was the advent of Krishna that we read about, you know, in the beginning of the 10th canto, where Krishna comes to the world. And now we're seeing it at the very end, when Krishna has departed from the world. So Krishna came, he rounded up all these demoniac kings and removed them from the planet. And as well, he had to remove his own dynasty, the Yadus, because they were too powerful and would have created a problem on the world if they had remained behind. Plus, you know, he wanted them to resume their original positions. Any other final questions here today? Okay, so this is, you know, this was kind of a tough verse to talk about the Chaturvyuha, but the Chaturvyuha is a part of the whole overall expansion of the Lord, and his many, many kinds of ways of expanding. Again, we accept that there is one Supreme, but he simply comes in many forms. And why not? Who's to tell him he can't? And these different forms have different purposes. Some of them are to have pastimes of devotees. Others are to perform functions in the deployment of the material universe. So these are the different kinds. All right, so I appreciate your attention, and thank you very much for attending Bhagavatam class. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.